那从这个东西来说，如果它能开启一扇门，让年轻的观众关心社会或者关心这个国际上的发生的事情的这个门槛。
虽然电影主题很严肃，不过却有影评人连票房都预测好了。
为什么会铁口直断1000万？当然这有可能我的认为就是说，很多越战电影，德国的他们去反省自己的伤痕文学的电影，这些电影题材本身也非常严肃，可是他透过好莱坞的资金、特效，还有训练有素的演员，即使它的表面还是个商业电影。
结合228江南案和陈文成命案串成的电影，要带大家走入时光隧道。
带走，马上带走。It's their show。
乡亲父老朋友，今仔日咱这段甲各位介绍，不只是一部电影，代表这部电影后边推动它，让这部电影会在今年8月6号在台湾要演出。后面一位台湾的朋友，也是台美第2代雕艺人吴友雕，跟咱观众打一个招呼。
大家好。
这部电影都有小看到吼，内底是一个 FBI 的人来台湾。FBI 我较早有讲，什么叫做 FBI？Formosa becomes independent。那么 FBI 真的来台湾了哈。这部电影拍了2年哈，拍2年，现在终于在台湾要演出。你为什么会想要拍这部电影
？I wanted to make this movie because I felt that most Americans and Westerners in particular don't know much about Taiwan at all. If they know anything about Taiwan, all they know is that the communists versus the nationalists, and they assume that Chiang Kai-shek was a good guy. and to them, to the Americans, he was the anti-communist hero. And what I wanted to tell the American and Western audience was a story about the Taiwanese people and their struggle for democracy and independence, and most importantly, the right to call themselves Taiwanese.
这部电影你该叫做讲被出卖的台湾啊，那 Formosa betrayed， 那我们就要问的是被谁出卖
？Well, that's a very good question. Definitely, Formosa has been betrayed, one could say, on many levels. You could say it was first betrayed by the Japanese, who came 1895 to 1945. Many people would say it was betrayed by the Kuomintang, who came after that. But to be honest with you, our focus on this movie is about the United States. It's about American foreign policy towards Taiwan, which we feel is very unfair. America says that it supports democracy. We went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan to create and support democracy. Yet here's a democracy in Taiwan that people fought and died for. And yet America doesn't recognize it as a country. That doesn't make much sense to me. It doesn't make much sense, I think, to most Americans if they understand the situation. This movie is really, when we created it, it's a Hollywood movie. First of all, it's made. It's a Hollywood director, Adam Kane. We had Hollywood screenwriters come to put it together. But my sense when I created this was to tell this story to the whole world. I wasn't thinking of a specific audience. To be honest, I wasn't thinking specifically that this was for a Taiwanese audience. I was thinking that this is a way for people to learn about Taiwan in a way that's entertaining and fun, and yet will hopefully touch their hearts in a way that maybe they've never seen before. As I said, most people don't know much about Taiwan, and especially about Taiwanese history. And so this is really an opportunity to use a Hollywood film to entertain and yet make a point about how precious the democracy is in Taiwan. Because as we know, Taiwan's democracy is still new. It's still something that's not yet fully formed, and there's many dangers to Taiwan democracy. And so we wanted to have this film to show the world, but particularly young people, particularly people who may not have been involved in the political process, but are now maybe beginning to realize how important it is for them to be involved.
我以前常开玩笑讲说哈 ，PowerPoint 年轻人非常喜欢。什么叫做 PowerPoint？If you don't have the power, you don't get to a point.
That's correct.
你要有这样的一个力量，才有办法说出这个故事。
That's very true.
这个电影是你一个人做起来的吗？很多人说是你一个人，没有你不行，但还没有别的人帮这个忙。
No, I mean, it was originally an idea that I had from growing up with Taiwanese parents. My parents, when I was growing up, always insisted that me and my sister call ourselves Taiwanese and not Chinese. Now, I'm American. I grew up in the United States, and to be honest, that didn't mean much to me growing up. But as I grew older, I realized that my parents took a lot of risk, tremendous risk, in order to come to the United States and to call themselves Taiwanese. Because at that time, it was illegal to call yourself Taiwanese. You were supposed to call yourself Chinese. And they refused. They spoke Taiwanese in our home. They insisted that me and my sister understand that. And through their life story and through all their friends and the many, many people I've met since then, there are literally hundreds, thousands of Taiwanese Americans who have come together to make this movie. The way we raised the financing for this is very unique. Actually, many people say maybe the first time in Hollywood history that we have so many investors, and it's by far one of the biggest Asian American movies ever made, primarily by Taiwanese American financing, which means that you have a lot of people like my parents who came to the United States to bring a better life, but always at the bottom of the day, the one thing they had is their love for Taiwan. They love Taiwan, and they want to do something for it. And I think that's why they invested in this movie. They wanted something to give to their children and to their grandchildren, to show them how much they suffered for this democracy, and so that we don't go backwards, so that we only go forwards in developing the democracy that Taiwan is today.
那这些朋友还有你的父母亲，可不可以算是这部电影里面的一个等于是他们是那个时代的一个小小的缩影。It was a part of the history of the life of your parents and of a lot of Taiwan Americans.
Absolutely, it is partly my parents' story, but it's much bigger than that now. I mean, this story about the murder of a Taiwanese professor and that he's spied upon by his students, and those students are being hired by the government of Taiwan at that time. That is a story that many Taiwanese Americans suffered. My parents were on the Omiatua, the Heimingdang, as were many of my investors, simply because they called themselves Taiwanese, and they joined Taiwanese American student organizations. I mean, we take for granted now that you can call yourself Taiwanese, but that was not the case at the time. And many Taiwanese came together, and Taiwanese Americans, Taiwanese Canadians, Taiwanese came together to invest in this. But what's even more interesting to me is that although 3/4 of the financing comes from the Taiwanese American community, another 1/4 comes just from Americans, not Taiwanese at all. And you have to ask yourself, well, why would they invest? And the truth is that this story, the story of oppression, the story of injustice, the story of identity, is universal. You don't have to be Taiwanese. A lot of people ask, if you're not Taiwanese, why would you care? The answer is because the issues and the problems that this movie shows is stuff that anybody can relate to. I'll tell you one story. I was in Brazil showing the movie at the Sao Paulo Film Festival. And of course, and there are many Brazilians in the audience. And in the question and answer period, somebody raised their hand and they said, you know, this story is very similar to Brazil. We too were a dictatorship in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It too was supported by the US. We also had student spies. Like, he kept on saying all these things. I have that happen all over the country, all over the world. I had someone from the Ukraine tell me after he saw the film, he's like, This is what the Russians did to us. It's like, you know, the Russians invaded. Like it's Chiang Kai-shek, it's like Stalin. You know? They feel very strongly. There are people all over the world, from South Africa, from Guatemala, from Brazil, from Ukraine, from Eastern Europe. I can go on
some countries in Africa.
Everywhere that understand this issue. I tell you, in the United States, we have two very strong constituencies for this movie outside of the Taiwanese American. One is African American, Black Americans. The other is Jewish American. You have to ask, why? Why do those two groups? Because they understand oppression. They understand people not oppressing them and taking away their identity and fighting for it. And that's something that, you know, obviously we see a lot of Holocaust films. Why do we see that? Is because the Jewish people have said, never again. Never again will we have another one. That's what they live by. That's what Taiwanese, we hope, will feel after watching this film, is that they will say, never again. Never again will we allow another country, another outside oppressor to tell us what to do.
You just said never again. 永远不要再来一次白色恐怖，永远不要再来一次228。这样的一个想法在台湾事实上是有的，尤其在中国这个军事强权这个站起来之后。但是你同时也讲了，这个电影里面有某种程度的 entertaining， 有一定程度的娱乐性。娱乐性，好莱坞跟台湾沉重的命运，这中间如何能够接得起来 ？Entertaining on the one hand, and the heavy fact of Taiwan. How can you put them together?
Well, I think at the end of the day, when you asked me who the audience was, we assumed in making this movie, you don't have to know one thing about Taiwan or Taiwan history. I mean, we literally, in the first frame of the movie, we talk about what is Taiwan, what is Formosa. That's the first thing. Then through this detective who played by James Van Der Beek, the FBI agent, he's someone, he doesn't know anything about Taiwan. All he knows is that someone's been murdered. And through his investigation, he then learns about Taiwan. He could have gone to anywhere else. He could have gone to South Africa. He could have gone to Northern Ireland. He could have gone to Rwanda. Nobody knows. But this particular story takes him to Taiwan. That's what makes this film unique, is that it's the first Hollywood film to deal with Taiwan. And yet, we do it, and a lot of people walk out of the movie, I would say, when I say a lot, I mean, I would say a lot of Americans, a lot of Westerners walk out of the movie, and I think they first say, wow, that was really good. That was a very entertaining movie.